Well, thanks very much. Yes, joining us now is Nisha Biswal, President of the US-India Business Council, to talk about the expectations ahead of the crucial 2+2 dialogue that will kickstart in the first week of September, which also coincidentally coincides with the US-India Business Council AGM, which will take place in the first week of September. Nisha, always a pleasure. Thanks very much for joining us here on CNBC-TV18. First, let me talk to you about the AGM. The US-India Business Council will host its first AGM in India, and it coincides with the 2+2 dialogue. What's the focus going to be, and what's the mood like as far as the US-India Business Council is concerned?
Well, thank you, Shireen. It's great to be on with you, and we're very much looking forward to this, as you said, first ever IDEA Summit, our annual general meeting that we are hosting in India. And the thinking behind this was that, first of all, we want to make sure that the US-India Business Council is reflecting the issues and the opportunities on both sides of this corridor. We thought that bringing our annual meeting to India and also structuring it as an IDEA Summit, where we're really focused on the future of this relationship and the opportunities that the US and India have to connect our future. We are going to be talking about how US and Indian companies are creating shared value in both countries, how our companies are contributing to the ability of society to meet its goals and aspirations. We will have discussions with thought leaders like Penny Pritzker and Anand Mahindra, talking about how the role of the CEO as a diplomat on the global stage. We will have conversations on data privacy and what that means in a digital economy, and many other important issues that we are grappling with, including sustainability in our economic development and women's empowerment.
Well, it is a packed agenda that you have lined up for the India IDEA Summit. The USIBC AGM will be hosted in the first week of September. But let me talk to you about the 2+2 dialogue and the expectations that you have, Nisha. Defense cooperation is expected to be a big part of the dialogue that will take place when the two principals meet. But just ahead of that, if I were to look at the statements that are coming in from the White House, this is specific with respect to the possibility of a waiver for India under the CATSA, which will allow India to purchase the S-400 system from Russia. Now, the comments seem to suggest, and this is what we're seeing from the Assistant Secretary of Defense, that we still have some very big concerns if India pursued major new systems and platforms with Russia. This will be the President's decision. The S-400 is a system that is particularly troubling for a lot of reasons. So coming a week ahead of the 2+2 dialogue, do you think that this is going to be a big stumbling block?
I wouldn't say that it's a big stumbling block, but it is an issue that needs to be discussed at the highest levels between our two governments. You see, the US-India defense partnership has matured extremely fast and rapidly and is going into areas of much more advanced technology, transfer, and cooperation. So as we start looking at more and more sensitive technologies and advanced technologies that are being shared and co-developed between our two countries, we have to think then about how those technologies are compatible or not compatible with other relationships. And we recognize that India has important relationships with countries other than the United States, including with Russia. But we also recognize that there is sometimes a incompatibility of our two platforms being able to coexist in the same arena without compromising some sensitive information. So those are issues that I think will need to get addressed and discussed between the two governments at very high levels to figure out what the way forward is. Because we definitely know that the US-India relationship is one that is going to continue to grow and deepen, and our defense cooperation is expected to further grow into more and more areas of advanced technology.
Any specific areas on the defense cooperation side that you believe we could possibly see a breakthrough post the 2+2 or at the 2+2, around drones, the possibility of helicopter purchases, missile systems, etc.? What would the expectation be in terms of getting tangible deals done?
Well, first of all, even in advance of the 2+2, the United States announced during the Indo-Pacific Business Forum that we hosted at the Chamber of Commerce, the Commerce Secretary announced that India was going to be eligible for STA1 category. And that means that India is going to have access to some of the highest levels of technology and is going to be treated on par with a NATO ally.
Yeah.
Now, that was announced even prior to the 2+2. I think as we go into the 2+2, we're hopeful that there will be breakthroughs on some of the enabling agreements that we are looking to put in place between the United States and India, including a communications agreement.
Yeah.
And that also paves the way for the sharing of information, intelligence, and technology at higher levels. So a lot of expectation that we can move through some of these areas and get to a much deeper level of cooperation between our two countries. And let's see what transpires. I know that there are many different procurement processes that are underway, and looking at different platforms that are being made available to India. So hopefully we may see some announcements or some decisions on some of those, although historically those decisions have not been linked to bilateral meetings, but happen kind of on their own time frame.
Sure, but you are feeling hopeful and confident that we will sign the COMCAS, which is the Communications Compatibility and Security Agreement. Nisha, let me move to trade then and ask you about what the expectations are on trade, because that's where we have seen a fair amount of friction, at least in the last few months. India's retaliatory tariffs still pending. What is the expectation on trade? And as part of the US-India Business Council, we've seen that trade target, which has been an aspirational target of $500 billion. Do you believe that continues to be, the realistic aspiration that we should look forward to?
Absolutely. The potential for our two countries to be able to really further integrate on trade and investment is just limitless. As you think about the size of both economies, the size of our population, and the synergies that exist between our two countries, there is just a tremendous untapped potential for deepening the trade and investment relationship in both directions. Now, we know that there have been issues in both sides that have gone unresolved, and that there has been an effort in recent months to try to intensify the dialogue. And we've seen multiple delegations that have gone back and forth between the two countries to try to reach agreement on a number of issues, whether it's on market access, on agricultural products, or whether it's on certain policies on tariffs, that if there can be a way to resolve some of these issues that create benefit in both directions, I think that that would be a strong indication and build confidence on the ability to have a more ambitious trajectory in our trade relationship. And that's one of the things that U.S. Chamber President Tom Donahue is going to talk about during his visit during our AGM, during the India Idea Summit, is the potential for the U.S.-India trade relationship to really reach much stronger levels of investment for both countries.
Let me end then by asking you, Nisha, what continue to be the big irritants when it comes to investment from a U.S. perspective? Which are the sectors that you continue to believe that there are restrictive policies in place that you would like the government to take note of, and what continue to be the areas of opportunity where we could see big deals perhaps happen and significant dollar inflow?
Well, let me say, first of all, that FDI coming into India from the United States has gone up over the last 5 years in very significant ways, and we expect that it will continue to increase. Now, is there much higher levels of FDI that can come into this country? Absolutely. You have seen strong investment into Indian enterprises, and I think that that continues to be an area of very robust interest. You haven't seen as much investment coming into infrastructure, into energy, And I think that there's a much greater scope for trying to bring in more investment in these sectors. I also think that in the technology sector that there is some concern about some of the policies that are right now being discussed and formulated on whether India is going to take a more restrictive approach to regulating data privacy, data localization, or whether India is going to take a more balanced approach. And I know that those are important issues that are being debated internally in the Indian government. There are also issues that our members, both Indian and U.S. Companies, are very focused on and want to strike the right balance and work with the government in trying to get the right resolution.
Nisha, I'll just end by asking you a follow-up on the data localization issue, because there is an RBI circular which comes into effect from October, and so far there has been no suggestion that there is any intention to tweak that, change it, relax it. What has been the conversation with government on this issue? And if there were no changes with that circular, what could the impact be, especially for US-based companies?
Well, I think everyone understands some of the reasoning behind why the government wants to require that data be held locally. But there are also unintended consequences to that. And so we have sought to engage government, both the RBI and Finance Ministry, in conversation on these issues to see if there are other options and other ways in which the government's goals and objectives can be realized without necessarily creating an environment where every country around the world is requiring that its data be held locally, which would be very disruptive and create a lot of inefficiencies. And countries like India, which frankly process data for billions of citizens around the world, their data is held in India and is processed in India because India has become in many ways a hub for so many different digital platforms that we want to make sure that we are preserving the efficiencies in that global data supply chain.
Okay, so that continues to be a cause for concern. But Nisha, thanks very much for joining us and giving us a heads up of what we can expect, both with the US-India Business Council AGM and the India Ideas Summit, the first in India, as also the expectations ahead of the 2+2 dialogue between India and the United States of America. Always a pleasure. Thanks very much for your time. We take a break, and there's a lot more coming up. Don't go anywhere.